want you to know. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't attribute that to my generation.
I think that is your generation.
We didn't do on fleek.
I think so.
No.
Certainly wasn't.
Well,
It was
I can't even
right in your guys' lap.
It was like right in between.
You can start to blame Gen Alpha later.
Yeah.
All right. It is past time to start already. All right. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right.
I came up on him 70.
We're live streaming. Don't admit guilt. 70 prayers per minute?
I think they're okay with 70. Oh, right,
I got a ticket for 70. Well, it wasn't
78.
Wow.
What's that?
It's like close enough.
Hands like they got me 110. They're not okay with 70.
70 and 78 are very good.
It's pretty close.
No, there's a big difference. 78.
23
miles an hour over the speed limit
No.
in front of Henley.
Well, they hit it when she does donuts too, but.
I know.
All right, guys. We are live streaming, just letting you know. So, we should be all set to go. Are we all good? Yeah?
Wonderful.
Cool, let's do it. Mary Grace, you want to pray us in? Mm-hmm. Amen. Hey guys, how you doing? I like the sweater.
Is there a reason for that?
I know.
doing this?
I keep getting all these comments. Somebody said, you know, stands for. I was like, IRS stands for, but I had to go look it up to make sure. I was like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, how are you?
We're getting
Oh, hi, thank you.
All right.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hi, Mama.
Please,
Not next to me. That's where the only microphone is. But that's okay. We edit this, and this is a live study, so it's okay if, you know, she disrupts a little bit. Huh? You're fine. You're fine. Guys, if you're online, you hear baby screams. It's my child. It's just the way it goes. Okay. Alrighty. Make sure. No, we're there. I'm not pausing anything, Sherry. All right. If they hear me, they hear me.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, we look good. Hey, Cade, can you do me a favor? Mind turn the camera this way a little bit? I got a really good shot of like the chairs. Yeah, that should do it. Thanks, buddy. All right.
I'm only sitting so close.
She immediately.
There's usually people.
I know, right?
People.
Well, you know, we have fixed the being early problem. Sometimes people show up late now, so. All right, guys, we all set? Ready to begin?
Yes.
Let's dive in. We're going to be going to the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 1. Yes, yeah, we concluded the Judges last week, so we're going from the Judges series to the Kingdom series. We're going to be talking about the last bit of time before the kings and then going into the lives of the kings during this book. So, This series will be a continuation of the last series, but again, a little bit further in Israel's history. So, as a recap, we touched on the fact that the book of Judges, followed the history of Israel following their exodus under Moses and the beginnings of their conquering of the Promised Land under the leadership of Joshua. We got to read about the 12 judges of Israel, and we really dug into the lives of Deborah, Gideon, and Samson. And then we finished last week by looking at the final 5 chapters of a judgeless Israel, right? And over this book, we got to see the slow breakdown of Israel as they cycled through being close to God, rejecting Him to chase other gods, punishments, and then their return under the judge, right? Whoever God would bring up at that time. We ended with the story of Samson, and we noted that he would begin the process of freeing Israel from the Philistines, yet someone else would be called in to finish the job, right? They would be under the Philistine rule for about 40 years. And then again, in the 5 chapters that ended Judges, no leader rises up, but behind the scenes, God was setting up the stage for revival and restoration and the freedom of Israel that would one day lead to a new phase in the history of the nation. So the person that he'd be raising up kind of behind the scenes was the prophet Samuel, all right? Although not in the book of Judges, many people recognize him as one of the judges of Israel because he was a leader, he was anointed by God, he did God's will, right? So the title of today's message is The Forerunner. We're going to be focusing again mostly on the lives of the kings during this book, but right now we're going to see kind of the prelude to that. We're going to read about the rise of Samuel, of his upbringing this week, and then next week we're going to focus on his career as the leader of Israel and as he transitions to appointing the kings, right? So, the story of Samuel starts much like Samson's story. We meet his parents first, with the Bible telling us that Samson's mother Hannah was barren. What made this situation even more painful for Hannah was the fact that her husband had a second wife named Peninnah, who had children with her husband and would use this as kind of an ability to taunt the other wife. Her husband did love Hannah, but in his disobedience to God's calling for marriage to be between one man and one woman, he ended up causing her a great deal of heartache. In the midst of this heartbreak, Hannah's husband goes to the temple to sacrifice to the Lord, and Hannah accompanies him and breaks away to cry out to the Lord. So, does anybody want to read 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 10 through 20? It's a 10-verse stretch. Go for it, Caleb. Take us there, buddy.
In her deep anger, Hannah prayed to the Lord bitterly. She made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, only look on your servant's misery and remember me, not forget your servant at first. And I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life. No razor will ever be used. As she kept on praying to the Lord, Eli observed. Hannah was praying in her heart. Her lips were moving, but her voice was not. Eli thought she was to her, How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine. Not so, my lord, Hannah replied. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of my great anguish. Eli answered, Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you your wish. He said, May your servant find favor in your eyes. She went her way, and her face was more. Early the next morning they arose and worshipped before the Lord, and back to their home. Elkanah made love to his wife Hannah. The Lord remembered. So in the course of time, Hannah was pregnant and gave birth to a son. As I asked.
Beautiful. So, a lot of things happen here, right? And there's a few of them to note. Number one, Hannah was unable to have children, just as Samson's mother was unable to have children. Hannah vows, just as Samson's mother, that he would never have his hair cut. And both women were given an assurance before any physical proof that they would have a child. And even though there isn't that physical proof, they walk away in faith that they have been spoken to by God and what he has said will come to pass, right? So Hannah, we get a good look at her character here. Although she's in turmoil, although her heart hurts and everything like this, she's a woman of faith, right? We also get a peek here into Hannah's heart. And it may have been mirrored in Samson's mother as well, as she dedicates her son to God. There would have been a mixture of relief, but also sadness when she eventually did give birth, right? She would have had relief from the heartbreak of barrenness, but she also would inherit a new challenge as she realized that this child was never meant to be hers to possess. This child was meant to be a gift from God to be handed back to him. Guys, this is kind of a heartbreaking thing because we're in the week leading up to Mother's Day. But I find sweetness in this struggle, not only for mothers, but in parents in general, right? For many of us, our children occupy a very special place in our life, right? And I've seen tons of parents where they don't want their kids to depart. So they want their kids around. There's this let's keep the family unit thing going, right? And that's blessed and that's awesome. But at the same time, as parents, we have to recognize that we are not called to keep our children as ours. They're not our possessions. We don't get to dictate what God's calling on their life is going to be or where the edges of that lie. As parents, as people entrusted with children, we have to understand that we're being given a gift. We are to disciple them, to love them, to nurture them. But then also the greatest thing we can do is also encourage them to follow after whatever God has them to do, which means that we're handing them back to God, right? And that calling, again, may be far away from us. It may be a scary calling like that of a missionary in a hostile country. And it might be to lead others to Christ in a large or small way, but we need to understand that the greatest gift we can give our children is the support and chasing after God, regardless of the personal cost to us, right? And Hannah embodies this lesson. She doesn't just pray for relief so that she can have a child to walk around and show off. She's not just praying for relief so that she can have something that she can keep to herself. She's praying for God to do a work through her. It's not just the pain of the fact that she can't have a child, but it seems to be the pain of the fact that there's a part of her ministry missing from her life. We skip ahead in 1 Samuel chapter 1 to verses 24 through 20, and it says this. After he, that Samuel, was weaned, she took the boy with her, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah, that's a measurement, of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh. Verse 25, when the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli, and she said to him, "Pardon me, my lord. As surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying to the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord has granted me what I asked of him." Verse 28, so now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord. And he worshipped the Lord there. It is believed that Samuel would have been right around 4 years old at this time. I guess 3 to 5, somewhere in there, when he was taken to the temple. And again, I can't describe personally how breathless I am in saying this because I have a 4-year-old son named Levi. The idea of taking him, even in the name of serving God, even with knowing that this was a promise I made, to live somewhere else without me being able to watch over him is heartbreaking, right? It's a devastating thought, let alone a reality. Yet even here at this young age, Samuel already had a connection to God. And at the close of verse 28 tells us that he worshiped God there. Hannah was not abandoning her child. This was not an act of neglect or of taking away the nurturing that he needed from him. She was allowing him to step into the calling of God. She knew that he needed something else more. That as much as she needed him in her life, she needed God more. As much as he needed her in his life to provide those things, God could provide them even without her. It's a heartbreaking picture. It's a beautiful picture. It's a difficult thing. And as we read into chapter 2, we see it begin with worship from the mouth of Hannah to God. Even in the midst of this heartbreaking occasion, she praises God for his work in her life and thanks him for his power and grace upon her. She has a much stronger faith in this moment and this area of her life than I bet any of us sitting in this room tonight, because God had revealed himself to her. And she didn't just understand the truth in a mental capacity, but she had experienced it. And for that reason, great faith had grown in her life in a way that we should all envy. Again, this is why in our church's kind of battle cry, in our motto here, right, in our creed and our mission statement, we say we want to know the gospel. She knew God deeply. She did not know just scripture. She was not just quoting someone else's thoughts. This wasn't a great pastor once said. She knew God personally and intimately, right? And it is upon the obedience of this set of parents, because the husband had to play a role in this too, and the great faith of a mother in Hannah that the story of Samuel begins. God blesses Hannah for her obedience, and after having Samuel, she'd have 3 more sons and 2 daughters. And just as Samson in Judges embodied Israel, so too Samuel would as well. Samuel marks the beginning of revival. But revival cannot come in the midst of great dedication to God. It has to shine out from darkness. So we get to see some of that now as we shift our attention. We read the name Eli in verse 26 of our last chapter. And he was the high priest who oversaw the temple. He was not spoken of at any point as being a wicked man, but he is shown to be the polar opposite of Hannah in his parenting. Does someone want to read verse 12 through 17 of 1 Samuel chapter 2? 1 Samuel 2, 12 through 17. Bob, you got it? Go for it.
Eli's sons had no regard for the Lord. That was practice. Whenever any of the people offered servants would come with strong pork, meat was being boiled. Would plant the pork in a kettle or cauldron pot. Whatever the pork brought up, the priest would take for himself. Treated all the Israelites. That even before the fat was turned, the priest's servants would say to the person who sacrificed, give the priest some of the meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat, only raw. The person said to him, let the fat be turned first. Take whatever you want. The servant answered, no, hand it over now. No, I'll take it by force. The sin of the young men was very great, and they were treating the Lord's offering.
Yep, you're good. Thank you, Bob. You know what we call this today, guys? Stealing from the tithe. All right? The sins that we're watching here are people stepping in the way of something being dedicated to God and taking it for themselves in an improper way, right? Today, a pastor like myself, we draw a paycheck from tithe for our work so we can dedicate ourselves to what God has us to do. And the priest did the same thing. However, there was a proper way and a proper amount that was supposed to be in the hands of God that they are ignoring, right? It's not a sin for ministers to take from the work of God, but they are detracting from the worship of God. They are exalting themselves with this, and they are doing it in a way that few would do so blatantly, right? They're stepping in going, hey, we know you're taking this meat to God, and there's a proper way for it to be offered. And there's a proper way for us to take from it, right? But they're going, we don't want boiled meat. This is a taste preference. They want to have a barbecue, right? So they're going, no, we want the best part. Bob, what would they often do when they took a burnt offering to God? What was the first thing they would do? It says right here in verse 16. If the person said to him, let the fat be burned first, why would that be important? Because God likes that was the premium part of the meat, right? These people are even going, look, just let us give the best to God. And they're going, no, the best belongs to us. And if you don't give it to us, we're going to assault you here before God and take it for ourselves. This is extortion. This is blackmail, right? And verse 17 says the sins of these young men were great, right? In the sight of the Lord, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. Let's look ahead now to what that would bring about in verses 22 through 26. I'm going to read that. It says, now Eli, who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing to all of Israel. Gets worse. And how they slept with the women who served at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Verse 23, so he said to them, why do you do such things? I hear from all the people about these wicked deeds of yours. No, my sons, the report I hear spreading among the Lord's people is not good. Verse 25, if one person sins against another, God may mediate for the offender. But if anyone sins against the Lord, who will intercede for them? His sons, however, did not listen to their father's rebuke, for it was the Lord's will to put them to death. Verse 26, finally. And the boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and in favor with the Lord and with people. Not only were they stealing meat, but they were defiling the women who were dedicating themselves to serving in the temple, right? These might have been widows. These might have just been women who set themselves apart, but this role was one that required them to forsake marriage and intimacy in order to serve in this capacity. The sons of Eli have no regard or fear for God, even when their father is warning them that God would soon be their enemy for these actions. And in verse 25, it tells us that God's will was to kill them, and we would soon see how this would come to be. But at the end of this group of verses, there's an acknowledgement that even as Samuel is being given this example of disobedience, he chooses to rise above it and serve God and the people well. This is where we have that juxtaposition, guys, that comparison between Hannah and Eli, where Hannah had helped her child step into his calling by being willing to obey God at great personal cost. Eli seems to have disagreed, but shielded his sons from the judgments of others around him because of his love for them. Hannah's love for her son was in line with her faith, and it allowed her son to be blessed, but Eli's love fought the righteousness of God, and rather than correcting his children so that they could repent, he instead allows them to continue to serve in the temple and to believe that they're above the laws of God. This is a wonderful picture of what to do and what not to do, guys, right? Again, Hannah's heart, her sacrifice, her willingness to do whatever God asked her to do, allowed Samuel to have everything he needed to rise above this situation, to be dedicated to God, to come into a great calling. Eli should have stepped in and sent his sons away from this position. He should have stepped in and rebuked them and then taken action, right? His unwillingness to do what was necessary to stand up for this truth will end up coming at a huge cost to his sons and his family. His inability to do what's right will be called out directly by God, as we'll read in a second. In verses 27 through 32 of the same chapter, a man of God comes to Eli and declares God's judgment on his family and his rejection of them. God asks Eli through this man, "Why do you honor your sons more than me?" Again, Hannah understands and submits to God even in the face of great loss. Eli honors his sons and treasures them even above righteousness. And we finally see a promise to Eli from God here in verses 33 through 36 of 1 Samuel chapter 2. It says, "Every one of you that I do not cut off from serving at my altar, I will spare only to destroy your sight and sap your strength, and all your descendants will die in the prime of life. And what happens to your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, will be assigned to you. They will both die on the same day." Verse 35, "I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and mind. I will firmly establish his priestly home, or his priestly house, and they will minister before my anointed ones always." Verse 36, "Then everyone left in your family line will come and bow down before him for a piece of silver and a loaf of bread and plead, 'Appoint me to some priestly office so I can have food to eat.'" God says that Phinehas and Hophni will die on the same day, that Eli's descendants will be pushed from their station in the temple, and they will be a weakly and poor group who will all die in the prime of their lives. And to me, this sounds like hereditary sickness, right? As it mentions that their strength will leave them and their eyesight will be destroyed. And they'll also be impoverished. They're going to come to the temple, goes, anything we can do to just have something to eat, something to spend, right? In contrast to this, God tells Eli that another will fill the role that his family was called to. This person would, of course, be Samuel. And to Eli's credit again, I imagine that as soon as he started to understand what Samuel's place was going to be in this, that there would be a temptation to try to stop it from happening, right? If you knew that there was someone coming up who's going to replace you in your family line, there might be the temptation to go, "I'm going to do anything I can to keep this from happening." But as he comes to realize that he doesn't hamper Samuel in any way. We skip ahead to chapter 3, guys, verses 1 through 21. And it gives us a unique story here in the course of the Bible, and something, again, that shows the character of Eli and God working through Samuel. Verse 1 says, "The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions." Verse 2, "One night Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place." Verse 3, "The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord, where the ark of God was." Then the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel answered, Here I am. And he ran to Eli and said, Here I am, you called me. But Eli said, I did not call, go back and lie down. So he went and lay down. Verse 6. Again the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, Here I am, you called me. My son, Eli said, I did not call, go back and lie down. Hey guys, real quick, we took the chicken out of the oven, right? Okay, cool. Just don't want to burn the church down. Sorry, guys. We're making dinner right now, live stream. That's all that's going on. That just occurred to me right now. The fire had knocked. I was like, oh, no. I'm sorry. So, verse 7. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. Verse 8. A third time the Lord called Samuel. And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, Here I am, you called me. Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. Verse 9, so Eli told Samuel, Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Verse 10, the Lord came and stood there, calling as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel said, Speak, for your servant is listening. And the Lord said to Samuel, See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears about it, tingle. Verse 12, at that time I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family from beginning to end. For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them. Therefore I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering. Verse 15, Samuel lay down until morning and then opened the doors of the house of the Lord. He was afraid to tell Eli the vision. Yeah, I would be too. That's not exactly great news. Verse 16, but Eli called him and said, Samuel, my son. Samuel answered, Here I am. Verse 17, what was it he said to you, Eli asked. And look what he says next. Do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide from me anything he has told you. He goes, don't lie to me. It's okay. Tell me the truth. Verse 18, so Samuel told him everything, hid nothing from him. Then Eli said, He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes. Guys, I feel terrible for Eli. He was a bad parent. He should have put his foot down. He should have done what was right. He needed to defend the reverence that Israel is supposed to have for God. All right? If the priest family doesn't reverence God, are you? No. For that reason, they are at fault. There's something going wrong here, right? Yet at the same time, in the heart of his heart, man, he seems to love God and want to do what's right. He doesn't hear even strike back about God's unjust. No, you heard wrong. He accepts the fact that what God has said is going to come to pass, and he understands the deserving nature of his sons for this. Verse 19, the Lord was with Samuel as he grew up, and he let none of Samuel's words fall to the ground. Verse 20, and all Israel from Dan to Beersheba recognized that Samuel was attested as a prophet of the Lord. Verse 21, the Lord continued to appear at Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel through his word. So again, here we see the blessing that was resting on Samuel in his earliest days, now coming into maturity. In a time where no one was hearing from God, Samuel is now hearing from God. In the midst of a family that has strayed from the path of God, Samuel will draw near to God and stand for what is right. And again, Eli is a good man, but a weak man. There's no doubt in my mind that he loved God, yet he did not train himself to stand up and enforce what was true or fight for righteousness. And there's an old saying that kind of embodies this. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. That basically sums up this man's story. He didn't want his sons to be doing these things. He didn't champion the idea of his sons doing these things, and yet at the same time, he did not stand up to them either. He should have thrown them out. Yeah, Caleb.
I'm curious in this story
Yeah.
about the very beginning. It says, in those days, the word of the Lord was again, or
Yeah.
his word.
Yeah.
And we hear that a lot in the New Testament.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
In this case, is it just literal word, or?
I believe this to mean the word of God coming through the prophets. So during this time, we have inscripturated prophecy, meaning what they're prophesying is recorded in the Bible as something that is true that would be handed down. So when we say that they didn't have the word, it doesn't mean that they lacked manuscripts or copies of the law, things like that. What they lacked was revelation. God isn't speaking through like he did the judges, right? Where we see these things proclaimed. We have seen a pronounced silence over the last period of judges, and this actually runs concurrently with some of that as well, the life of Eli and these things. So we're seeing a period of silence across all fronts, and then suddenly Samuel seems to be being spoken to, and that's why it says God did not allow even one of his words to hit the ground. When he speaks, God shows that it is him speaking through Samuel. These messages are true, because it would have been something shocking at this time. Yeah. Bob?
Always meetings.
Yeah.
Eli is
Mm-hmm.
Eli, back my God.
Yeah.
Name
Yeah. It was very much his God. Yeah. That's fair.
Heavy will be asked.
Yeah. And it very much embodies what he was. So let's go ahead and read out of chapter 4. Somebody want to read verses 1 through 3? And I know we're covering a lot of ground, guys. This is so that we can get a character study rather than just verse by verse history lesson. We're trying to kind of summarize a huge portion of Israel's history in a couple of weeks. So if you guys want to go back, study this deeper, I would advise you guys to. There's a ton more in here. We just want to give the broad strokes. So who wants to read chapter 4, verses 1 through 3 for us? Hannah, go for it. It's timely. Chapter 4, verses 1 through 3? 1 Samuel? Go ahead. I also have now.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You're doing fine. There it is. Yeah. Now we match. Beautiful. So, let's give a picture of what's happening. The Philistines, the people who have been occupying and abusing Israel, are now fighting against Israel, right? They're raising resistance, but what happens when they do raise resistance? They get routed, right? Verse 3 says, when the soldiers returned to camp, the elders of Israel asked, why did the Lord bring defeat on us today before the Philistines? Why do you guys think it was, after reading the book of Judges, that they are losing this battle instead of winning? Sin, wake-up call. What was that, Mary Grace? Disobedience. Yeah. They're not close to God, right? Yep. They want the rubber stamp Jesus. Just, yep, whatever you do, we'll go with that. Good by me, right? They want a rubber seal, nothing else. Dad?
The reaction to getting beaten and defeated and all this, did they stop and say, let's have a fast, let's bring ourselves and prostrate ourselves before the Lord? No, let's get the ark and let's try this. They try the fast way, something quick.
Yep. They try the Flex Seal tape, man. They're going for whatever gets the plane off the ground, right? 100-mile-an-hour duct tape. Why did God not empower the Israelites to win? Was it because he was too physically far removed from them? No. Was it because they didn't say the right words in a prayer? There's no prayer recorded. No. Was it because he was too busy for them elsewhere? No. It's because of their spiritual state. They aren't repentant. They're carrying on in the same wickedness that they had been in the closing of the book of Judges, where it says that every man did what was good in his own eyes, right? So when they brought the ark out, this isn't in hopes of using it to repent. This isn't a church service of let us get close to God, like you said, let us fast or something like that. They are looking at it through the eyes of religion, hoping that some sort of holy relic would deliver them. As if this piece of wood and metal being carried would leave God no choice but to have to favor them and intervene. What did they end up making out of this Ark of the Covenant? They made an idol out of it. Lucky charm. Just like they looked to the statue of Baal or the Asherah poles, or this is going to be the thing. This is what's going to get us through. They looked to the ark while denying its source of power. It was the Spirit of God that had always caused things to happen, not the physical presence of an ark, right? When it went out before battle, like with Joshua and things like that, it wasn't because the presence of this item, it was because the presence of God and his blessing on this item that things changed, right? They had no sense of what was wholly true. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And what's sad is I think this mirrors a story in Maccabees. So look at some extra biblical books here. The story of Maccabees, there's an account of the Jews going out to fight. And they're doing it in the name of God. And then later, after the battle's over, they look at their fallen comrades, and under their tunics and stuff, there was little graven idols to other gods. They went out with these lucky charms going, this is going to give me strength, and this is going to protect me, and this is the God of this is the God of that. They're treating it the same way. I'm going to have my little totem, and this is going to get me through. And like you said, it's a lack of understanding of the holiness of God. They're treating this as a trinket that can be cashed in for favors. It's the quick fix. Why go through all this hard stuff of having to repent to God? Let's just force him to intervene for us. Holy rabbit's foot, exactly, right? Whatever the lucky Jesus foot equivalent is here. Verses 4 through 9 say this. Let's look at the outcome of this action. So the people sent men to Shiloh, and they brought back the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord Almighty, who was enthroned between the cherubim. And Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were there with the Ark of the Covenant of God. Verse 5. When the Ark of the Lord's Covenant came into the camp, all Israel raised such a great shout that the ground shook. Has anybody ever had that happen in their lives? There's just a crowd shouting and stuff, and you feel a stadium or something shaking before? Got to go to a Dodger game where they were booing an outfield. An outfielder for the Brewers. And the stadium is just shaking on its foundation. You're like, my goodness, that is a terrifying thing. There's like 61,000 people booing all at once. Scary, scary feeling for a young child, right? The Philistines hear that. They hear Israel going, yeah, we're going to do this. Verse 6 says, hearing the uproar, the Philistines asked, what's all this shouting in the Hebrew camp? When they learned that the ark of the Lord had come into the camp, the Philistines were afraid. A God has come into the camp. They said, oh no, nothing like this has happened before. They're thinking of the other battles they've had. It says, we're doomed. Who will deliver us from the hands of these mighty gods? They have no understanding of the Hebrew God. They are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the wilderness. Be strong, Philistines, be men, or you will be subject to the Hebrews as they have been to you. Be men and fight. This is so interesting. So interesting. It's interesting to see the Philistines' reaction to the ark. They're fearful of God, even though they've been dominating the Jews. Let me ask you guys, how could they possibly fear God after so soundly beating Israel and dominating them? How could you run over God's people and still have a fear of God? But those stories have been there since the beginning. And they've been absolutely beating down Israel to this point. Why are they now suddenly afraid? Yeah? It's funny to me. I'll wager this thought. I wonder if they actually had a better understanding in Israel of the distance between God and his people in this moment. They've been beating down Israel left and right, seemingly fearlessly. And in their minds, they're going, it's because they don't have that God who got them out of Egypt backing them. So we can just take full advantage of them. Now it seems as though he's making his appearance again, right? And suddenly now they're worried that their easy wins have come to an end due to a possible revival. They're going, oh no. Have they called upon the gods in their eyes who did all of this before to Egypt? Because if this is, we stand no legitimate chance. They become a desperate bunch here. They look at this going, we're going to have to fight or else. There's no easy way out of this. Either we're going to be enslaved to them or we're going to fight our way out of this. So they go, what other choice do we have? Forward, right? I wonder also on the flip side if Israel felt the opposite way. I wonder if they're sitting there going, We don't need preparation. Yeah, we don't need to fight that hard. We got the ark. It's going to be easy. We're going to walk through them. We're going to trounce them, right? We're going to go put the ark back, and then we're going to get back to partying, right? Woo! Let's see what the outcome is. Who wants to read verses 10 and 11? Very short account of battle. Go ahead, Ron.
So the Philistines fought. The Israelites slaughter was very great. Israel lost 30,000. Ark, God, nice.
Hophni.
And
Yeah.
Penny.
Yep. So they went out and fought. How many men were lost the first time? 4,000. How many men died this time? 30,000. Last time Israel got beaten, maybe held the line a little bit. This time they get beat and they just run to their tents. This is tail between your legs behavior, right? God keeps his word to Eli as well and offs his two sons in the same battle and punishes Israel for their faith in an item rather than in God himself by multiplying the dead and by allowing the ark to be taken from them. He removes the stumbling block from his people and will work to reveal that it is him that they need to look to for hope. God is not done, however, with the family of Eli. As a messenger comes to deliver the news back to Israel of what happened, this messenger gets to the gates where he sees Eli the priest and delivers this message. And guys, I want to remind you, Eli's sight is not good anymore. All right? You would have known what the news was going to be by the appearance of this messenger. Eli doesn't because he can't make out what this guy looks like at this moment. Who wants to read verses 16 through 18? Please, Megan.
And said, I am who has come. I fled from you. Said, go my brought the news. He who brought the news. Israel has fled to the Philistines. There has also Hophni and Ark. As soon as Eli fell over backwards.
So he asks what's happened to his sons. He gets the news. What's the news that breaks his heart? Israel has reached a new low. They've had the Ark of the Covenant taken from them. This had not happened to this point in Judges or any other book. At this point, they have lost the thing that was supposed to be their closeness to God. This was something that had carried on from the time of Moses. This was their connection. This was the thing that gave them hope that they could rally around. And rather than God acting when they brought it, God allowed it to be taken from them, right? From here on, 1 Samuel focuses on something very interesting. In the next 2 chapters, it follows the journey of the ark rather than the people as it was captured until its return. In chapter 5, it tells us that the Philistines took the ark to a temple, the temple of Dagon, the fish god, worshipped by the people of people of Nineveh, and God was about to teach them a lesson. He wanted the Philistines to know, look, you captured the ark, and you beat down Israel, but I allowed it. I have not been conquered. You have not overcome the God who delivered Israel out of Egypt. You've overcome the people who have cut themselves off from me, right? When they put the ark in the temple of this idol, the next morning their God was found face down in front of the ark as though it was worshiping. And they go, that's weird, and they stand it back up. Only to come back the next day and find it again in that position, but now with its hands and its head broken off. God was sending a clear message. I am not subservient to anybody. I serve no one. I am not inactive. You were allowed to capture this item. You have not conquered the God of Israel. From here, the Philistines were struck with tumors, and they understood that God was afflicting them. And according to the Septuagint, rats also pillaged the countryside. So they immediately call their 5 rulers together and say, send the ark of God, the God of Israel, away. Let it go back to its own place, or it will kill us and our people. Does that sound like people who are confident they got this? No. Does that sound like anybody's like, this is in the bag, don't worry? They are terrified. They understand something terrible has happened to them. They took some war spoil, and what they brought back is a curse for them, right?
Back in that day, if your army won, that meant, in their minds, that meant your God is more powerful.
Oh, 100%.
So they won, but the real God is showing them, you are not more powerful. I'm showing you, I allowed them to be defeated like you said.
Yeah. Well, and this mirrors the story of Samson from last week. Remember, where did they take Samson when he got his eyes gouged and everything? Go to a temple, celebrate. 3,000 people on the rooftop. All the leaders of the Philistines are there, right? What are they celebrating? Does anybody remember? And?
Dagon. Was it Dagon?
Mm-hmm.
Dagon.
They said, our God has overcome their hero, their champion, the person God was empowering. We got this. Then Samson topples the temple on them in God's power, right? Showing again, no, player. You did not conquer God. Samson was out of line. You beat him up a little bit. He's still going to get the last laugh, right? So again, after Fox terrorism in the fields, then we have this terrible, outcome for them. And now again, they're going, well, look, there's not even a man here. We're just going to take this item that belongs to God, that represents their God. And again, they're getting shellacked. It says after 7 months, they decided to send the ark back. It took 7 months? Good Lord. After 7 months, they decided to send the ark back, but also thought they needed to send a gift to appease God. That's what their priests are like. Don't just send it back. There has to be a present. We don't want to botch this, right? And they decided to send the ark back with 5 gold tumors and 5 golden rats. They go, all right, this is what we got. We're going to send it back. You beat us. And again, this represented the leaders of the 5 territories of the Philistines. So they're going, we're all paying tribute to this God, all right? We're sorry. Our bad. Go back, right? Then they put it on a cart and hitched it to 2 cows and sent it back to Israel. The ark arrives back to Israel in Beth Shemesh. And once a few people take hold of it, the rulers of the Philistines go home. They were making sure it got to where it needed to be, right? The people of Beth Shemesh take the cart, they chop it up, and they sacrifice the cows that pulled the cart to God. Good sign, all right? It's a good sign. But chapter 6 ends with an eerie reminder to Israel of God's holiness as we see 70 of the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh die due to improperly handling the ark, which Israel had been told was only to be handled by the sons of Korath, according to Numbers chapter 4. It's back. Great. Learn your lesson. Not a totem, not a fun thing. Does not guarantee an outcome that you want. Not a genie in a lamp, Mary Grace, like you said. Not a genie in a lamp. In addition to that, it is holy, it is to be reverenced, and you are not going to reestablish a disrespectful connection to God. We're going to reset this connection, right? And again, it may seem cruel to us, but in this time, Israel's disregard for God had reached ridiculous levels. And just as God saw fit to make an idol bow down to the ark and let the Philistines know of his power, he sees fit here to remind Israel that he is alive, powerful, and to be reverenced and obeyed. This would lead to the next phase in the history of Israel, a great revival, as the nation would look to the little boy who was dedicated to the temple to lead them. Samuel would now rise to the calling God had placed on his life and lead Israel into a new, renewed relationship with God and complete the job that Samson had begun but failed to finish. He would lead Israel into freedom from the Philistines. And we're going to get into that to our next chapter as we continue reading. Mary Grace, do you have something? You're just holding your pen up. Please.
Yes, yes, there's a
Go ahead. Yes. Yes, she does too. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. 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 God allowed them to hit rock bottom. absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Something we're going to talk about Sunday, actually. I just finished that message. Yeah, but no, you're completely correct, Mary Grace. And this was a loss of that connection. Pops?
I was thinking to myself, if first time the Israelites are running out there, they're kicking back at home.
Yeah.
So people are getting killed, 4,000 are killed. But then they say, hey, let's go with the ark. These were very godless men. But suddenly they're like, oh, shoot, we have to go into the fighting now. They have no faith in God. They have no trust in God. To me, it seems it would be a terrifying thing to them.
Or they think, hey, we're celebrities. We're in proximity to the ark. This is assured victory. And yeah, we're the big dogs. We're part of the priesthood, everybody. Calm down. We got this. Both of them die.
If you're walking in with people start shooting.
Yeah, you're like, here's the big guns, everybody. Don't worry, we're bringing God into this now. You speak for God now, Phineas and Hophni? Yeah, as if. No, again, Mary Grace, I think you nailed it as well. I'm glad that Israel, at this point, is now seeing their departure. It's no longer a quiet thing. It's no longer an unknown thing. It's becoming very shockingly clear to them that something has gone wrong. And that's what opens the doors for that revival. You know, we'd hope that our churches and our nation and things like that would not just be quietly puttering along with, well, it's good enough, we're close enough to God, where when we've departed, the greatest mercy God can give us is a show of the fact that we are not where we need to be, so we can restart that journey, so we can hit our knees and repent. Yeah? Yeah. No. Amen. Yep. And I'll ask you to pray for that as well, Mary Grace. On Friday, we're doing that concert thing in City Fest as well. It's an outreach to youth kids and a gospel proclamation as well. So pray for that as well, because like you said, the work continues on, you know? Bob, you had something?
Names.
Yeah.
Means pugilist, boxer. That was his character.
Yeah.
Phineas.
You're fine, Bob. No, but both these guys again locked horns.
I wrong.
Mhm.
Like I just think it's parallel how Russia because
Mhm.
we used to be strong.
Yeah.
Morals. Look at it. Fallen away.
Yeah. And I would say also pot calling the kettle black a little there. I would also say we're not murdering our political opponents.
Well, okay. Yes.
But yes, it's very easy to point out that we have strayed far from what God called us to be.
Well, and they're like, hey, you're weak now,
Yeah.
so
There may be some unfortunate truth to that, because again, like you said, we are not as close to what we were supposed to be.
Yeah.
And even if we look back to the 50s and everything like that, where there was more God and country and things like that, I wonder quietly where the hearts of our nation. We may have been closer to where we were supposed to be, but maybe not what we were meant to be, you know? So to me, I find comfort in the fact that perhaps even the world senses the fact that we've drifted, because the call of revival hits a lot harder at that point than when everyone's like, no, I'm a good Christian. I go to church every Sunday. I just happen to drink and beat my wife every Friday. You know? Little less disillusionment there, you know? Guys on the live stream, I'm going to go ahead and let you know we're going to wrap up right here. And we're going to go ahead and conversate. Thank you guys for tuning in, and God bless.